Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here early morning for the first morning session, especially given what I saw the competition is over there for your time where there's a tasting going on. So now that I've said that, half of you may flood out of the room. I don't know. I might be right behind you. This morning, we're going to talk about this idea of becoming a more people-centric digital workplace. And we're going to share some case studies and how that's worked in a number of different organizations. But to start that discussion, we need to go back in time. We need to actually go a long way back in time, back to the early 1800s. So just like now, the early 1800s was a time of tremendous transformation. Everything around us was changing at an unprecedented rate, and people were flocking to cities, urban centers, like never before, in the hope and on the promise of having a future, having a job, creating an income, creating something to leave to their children. But all of this change, all of this industrialization was actually creating a lot of negative consequences too. Because you see, our cities could not keep up with our people. Population was growing so fast that infant mortality rates were peaking. They were at an all-time high. Social unrest was getting out of control. There were whispers of revolution in a lot of cities. There was a lot of frustration. Even lifespans were shorter than ever before, and a lot of this was because sanitation conditions were abysmal at this time. So that, in fact, if you're not familiar with this term, the unwashed masses came from this time in history, where if you came from about 95% of the city that didn't have good sanitation facilities, and you went into one of the nicer parts of the city, people could literally smell that you were not from around that part of the city. That's how bad things were, and this is the early 1800s. Well, during that time, Baltimore, Maryland was the shining city on the hill. You may not have known this, but in 1840, Baltimore, Maryland was the second largest city in the United States of America, and its future was bright and promising. And Baltimore looked at it and said, we don't need technology. We don't need to be any more people-centric than we already are. Our future is secure. We've been around a long time. We don't want to change. So Baltimore, Maryland stayed where they are. Chicago, Illinois, by contrast, was a podunk little frontier town, number 83 in terms of overall size of cities in the US. But Chicago looked around and said, what are we going to do to take care of our people? What are we going to do to be a people-centric city where people will want to come, where people will want to spend their lives, where business will flourish, but human life will also flourish? And so Chicago was actually the first major city in the United States of America to invest in a centralized sewage system. And you can actually see from the chart next to me, by the way, if we could start the timer, that would probably help me a little bit. Chicago was able to look at this and say, we think this will make a difference. And if you look at the graph near me, you can actually see Chicago's growth started to change. In fact, it didn't take long at all for Chicago to surpass Baltimore and eventually replace Baltimore as the second largest city in the country. And Baltimore, Maryland, by contrast, waited and waited and waited because, hey, we're successful. We're already doing great. We're poised between Washington, D.C. and Philly and New York. We're in this megalopolis where our future is secure. We just don't need to make those kind of investments. And besides, we've been around for a while, and we don't want to change. And Baltimore, Maryland was the last major city in the United States of America to invest in a centralized sewage system. And you can see what happened to their growth as a result. Now, I actually gave this exact story in a Washington, D.C. conference not long ago. And right before it, I was kind of introducing myself to people. And a lady in the audience said, I'm with the Baltimore, Maryland sanitation system. And I'm thinking, oh man, I hope I got my facts right in this thing. And she actually came up afterwards and said, you were spot on. And we still are struggling to keep up. We still have not figured this thing out as a result of it. There are those who change and there are those who don't change. So, when our cities can't keep up with people, we know what happens, right? I've been looking for an excuse to use that emoji for a long time. I'm glad I could finally do that. But what about our wineries? What about our other businesses? What about, as everything around us is changing today, what's going to happen if we don't keep up with our people? We're probably already starting to experience employee turnover and recruiting can become a more and more difficult challenge. In fact, for the first time in our company's history, we've been around for not quite 20 years, people are starting to come to us and say, our biggest challenge is not getting new clients, getting new customers. Our biggest challenge is getting and keeping employees, talented people who are going to be a part of our team. What do we do if we can't keep up with our people, whether they're inside or outside of our organization? And how can we leverage these digital tools that are out today to actually do that better? So that's what we're going to talk about. Quick introduction to me. Again, my name is Geoff Ables. I geek out on this idea of technology and people, these two things that actually seem at odds with each other. But how can you bring these together to actually become more people-centric? Instead of making technology a tool that dehumanizes your workforce in the name of more and more productivity and efficiency, which are not bad things, and instead say, how can we use technology to superhumanize our workforce, to unleash the creative and innovative and customer service human connection potential of people that machines are never going to be able to do in our lifetime and probably far beyond our lifetime? How can we do that? That's what we want to talk about today. And on the right side of this, depending on how you look at it, is the slightly non-geekier side of me. So my wife and I are now empty nesters. Any other empty nesters in the room? Just a few. They will tell you and I will tell you, it is a phase worth waiting for, man. It is amazing being an empty nester. It feels awesome. So our two grown daughters are now married. We've got two sons-in-law. We love hanging around with them. We just found out that we're going to be grandparents for the first time in our family history. So we're very excited about having a grandson in the family. We love enjoying wine. I say that everywhere I speak, but I say that with a lot of humility here because I'm saying it to people who know way more about wine than I do. But we really enjoy fine wine. We also love riding our Harley Davidson together whenever we can. Any other riders in the room here? A few riders? All right. Right on. We need to connect. We love to come ride and meet new friends when we ride. We try not to enjoy both of those passions at the same time. So here's kind of the picture, the historical picture of where we are, just to put this in context. If you look at this image, about every 100 years, we've had another industrial revolution, right? So going back to the 1700s, even before the period I talked about, that's where we had coal and steam, right? And that started to change the nature of how we worked and how we connect as human beings. Then 100 years later, we have electrification. That obviously starts to play a huge role in how businesses work, how they get their power, how humans interface in the workplace. And then in the 1960s, we have what a lot of people consider the current industrial revolution, and that's the computer communications type of revolution. And a lot of people would say, okay, we're there, and maybe you kind of put yourself inside of that circle somewhere, right? We think we're finally adopting this and starting to leverage this and getting some value out of it. Now, in my experience, a lot of the companies I work with are actually further behind the middle point than they would think that they are. They've got more room to go. But here's what's happening. If you look at that every 100-year cycle, we are due. We are not at the end of the digital revolution. We are at the beginning, the dawn of whatever that next revolution is. And there's a lot of things that figure into it. I'm not smart enough to name it. A lot of people are trying to name it. Maybe that's the digital revolution. Maybe it's some other revolution. But the reality is, if you thought things had been changing at an unbelievable speed for the past 20 or 30 years, man, fasten your seatbelts because the pace of change is only going to increase. And if you're a Baltimore, Maryland, you're going to be left further and further behind. So ideally, how do we become more the Chicago? How do we start to say, what can we do so we don't get left behind in the wake of all this change that's going on right now? Now, what happens is a lot of people, a lot of businesses say, oh, there's an easy button for that, right? There's somebody came along, maybe on the Expo floor out there, there's somebody. Maybe it's someone like us who consults in it and says, if you just buy and install this thing, right, this customer management system, this employee engagement system, that's pushing the easy button. Turn that on, and guess what? You'll be collaborating better, and you'll have better relationships and all this other stuff. And so you push that easy button, and you keep pushing that easy button. And after a while, you've pushed that easy button a number of times, and you realize maybe that's not what it actually says on that button after all, right? This is not easy. If this were easy, you would all be there already. If this were easy, Baltimore, Maryland would have pushed the easy button and caught up with everybody quickly. It's not as easy as it sounds like. The technology part is actually the easy part. The soft stuff is the hard stuff. The people stuff is the hardest part of this thing. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. And the statistics, by the way, support this. This is what Forbes magazine says about this idea of digital workplace, digital transformation. If you read the whole article, it also says we better figure it out, we better do it so we're not left behind, but it's also powerful when we get it done right. But more people are failing than are succeeding, right? So the reality is there's no easy button, right? A slow, cumbersome caterpillar doesn't become a beautiful, agile butterfly in one step. It is an incremental process. It's slow, it takes time, it's incremental. We can't do it all at once. If there's one point I want to push home to you today, I would say take that home with you today. Don't come out of here and get excited and say, I'm going to buy all this stuff and 2020 is going to be the year where we digitally transform. It's not that the technology can't go that fast. It's that your people can't go that fast. They can only absorb it so fast. So think about a roadmap, a steady pace to get you there. So the DNA of our organization is we wanted to get to the bottom of this, right? We started off good. We had a lot of really good clients, and we had a lot of really good success stories where we kind of waved the checker flag, and the project seemed to go well, and clients seemed to like us, and yay team, we move on to the next project because we help people digitally transform. But when we started looking in our own rearview mirror, knowing the statistics about other people who had bad failure rates, but not us, we started looking in our own rearview mirror a number of years ago, and we started to realize that picture wasn't as good as we wanted that picture to be. The checkered flag wasn't what we thought it was, right? Setting up the technology and doing a little bit of training, that's not the end of the race. That's the beginning of the race. And how you incrementally move on from there is what this is all about. So we investigated because we said we don't want to just be a company that just does this and walks away and leaves people to pick up the pieces. We want to understand why some people succeed and other organizations really struggle. And that journey led us to discover 5 habits, a 5-part framework that the successful adopt that those who struggle never seem to get. And the interesting thing about this 5-part framework is this. It's actually the same 5 things that are at the foundation of every human relationship throughout history. All that we're trying to do in business is figure out, how do I do that at scale? How do I go from using technology to automate processes, which is not a bad thing, but it's very task first, to starting to use technology to be people first, to help create those things in my organization that lead to longer lasting, more deep, more loyal connections person to person. Because that ultimately is what I think the next wave of this revolution is going to be all about. How are we engaging people? So what I'm going to talk about today are the 5 things that we discovered in that journey. There was a humbling journey. And the very first one was simple. How does every human relationship begin? It begins by listening. Right? It begins by listening. We listen to each other and we write down what we hear on the tablet of our brain, right? We remember what we hear, we listen and we remember what we hear. And in our organizations, there's another word for that. It's called data, right? In our systems, we say, so how do we have a collective memory where we put all of that information? Sounds simple, but the reality is most of us are 12-headed monsters or more. We don't have a corporate memory. We have 10, 12, or 25 is what this research tells us is normal, different places that people have to go to get their jobs done each week. And the research that we have done has found that the more places people have to go to get their jobs done, the more they feel like the computer. They feel like the automation that just exists to move data around from one system to another. In fact, the way one of our clients put it to us once when we were doing a rescue project for them, things had gone wrong with someone with a project they were doing, they called us in, we started doing some interviews, and someone said, look, we felt like every day we were taking a hill for the leadership team. It's kind of a military metaphor. We're taking a hill. We have heavy packs on our back, and those packs are filled with rocks. And each of those rocks had the name of some application on it that we had to use to get to the top of that hill. And someone came in with a new rock on it that said, fill in the blank, Office 365 is what they said in this case. They threw the rock in our pack and said, that should help, and then walked out the door. Like, of course that doesn't help. It's just another rock in the backpack. It's not taking anything out. And that dehumanizes people. In fact, the way another person put it is, we got this new technology to work for us, but we feel like we work for it. I spend now more of my time putting stuff into this system than I used to put into any other system to do stuff, and I'm not getting anything out of it. It's not making me more human, it's making me less human. So what do we need to do? Your reaction to that might be, oh, less system. We need to listen in fewer places, but the reality is our workforce and our customers are changing and demanding that we give them the tools to listen in more and more places than ever before. Probably between the time I start this session and the time I end it, there's going to be some other new social media platform that exists out there, right? I'm not saying you have to be in every single one of those, but what I am telling you is, particularly for younger generations entering the workforce or wanting to connect with you as customers or prospects or vendors, they're saying, look, I've grown up in a world that understands how to use social, not just for fun, but to actually create deeper human relationships. I'm using all these tools that I expect to use in my workplace. And if I'm in a workplace that doesn't give me those tools, you know what I'm going to do? I'm eventually going to find one that is. If I'm in Baltimore, I'm eventually going to find my way to Chicago. So part of this is we've got to give people these tools because they are communicating on those platforms. And if we're not giving them those things to do, they're not going to stay with us for as long, and or we're not going to hear what they're saying anyway. The real answer is we need to remember in fewer. So how do we do that? We have all these places to listen, we have all of these ears, but how do we have fewer brains? And that's the idea of the backpack, right? It's, hey, look, if I'm going to put this rock in your backpack, I'm going to figure out how to take at least one rock, if not two, out of the backpack so that, yeah, you're listening in more places, but you have fewer places to go to actually get your job done, to remember what you've heard and all of those. So here's what one winery did with all of this at a very high level. I'm going to share 5 case studies throughout this session today. This is the first. So essentially what they said was, we want to be able to have employees collaborate, and we want to better retain them, and we're communicating across multiple locations. So this was a mid-sized organization that had about 200 people in it, and they said, we've got people not just in one office, relationships are starting to get more scattered. How do we create connection, but how do we use digital to create that sense of connection? One of the gratifying things about this particular project is this client said, look, we don't want to just drive automation or productivity or all those things. We actually want this to improve our culture. And one of the things this particular organization said was, one of our cultural norms that we have as a vision is we want to be a place where people, when they wake up in the morning, they want to come here. They look forward to coming to the workplace. Now, talk about a vision that you're never going to accomplish 100%, right? But it is a vision that can continue to challenge you day in and day out. So they looked at that and said, what can we do? So first of all, they said, look, let's be intentional about this and not just turn something on. We want our managers to be able to put blogs and news and articles out there, not just blast things out via email or rare all-call company meetings where they can get messages out, but they can put messages out in a more meaningful way, and in a meaningful way, not that just broadcasts top down, but also listens bottom up. So they got this idea of we want vertical talking and listening, we want horizontal. Then they said among our employees, we want them to have those discussions with leaders digitally if they choose to, because that's how many of them are comfortable communicating these days. And we also want those employees and managers to be vertically connected to our customers, to listen to customer feedback on an ongoing basis so they can see whatever our customers are saying and they can actually discuss it, again, digitally if they prefer, non-digitally if they'd like to. And then horizontally, how we help our employees connect to each other, recognizing colleagues for doing a good job, sharing knowledge with each other, and at the end of the day, actually creating work that's distributing or giving more value to the bottom line of the business. So some quick screen grabs of what some of that looks like. Here's something where the managers kind of leadership put something out there around some upcoming events with articles underneath it, but you can actually see, sorry for the small type, but how they actually start to note and appreciate people within the organization for doing things. And people can actually respond in a conversation thread that they're used to responding to. And the amazing thing for this organization is a leadership and management team who sometimes doesn't see certain people for long periods of time. And when they do occasionally engage with those people one-on-one, they feel like, wow, this is great that I'm being recognized by someone at that level in this organization. All of a sudden now on that person's birthday or when someone else recognizes that person for doing a good job, they see something in the thread, in the communication thread from a senior executive saying, you know what, we really appreciate what you're doing for this company and how you're contributing to us. So it's like, oh my gosh, this person took the time to recognize me in a way that they would have never had time to recognize me in before. Leadership can also now start to measure sentiment. Both sentiment of the people who work in the company and sentiment of their customers. Sentiment is all those communications that are going on, digital communications that are going on. What's the sentiment? Are people generally positive? Are they generally negative? And what's the overall communication trend? So, separate case study from this particular one outside of the wine industry for a technology manufacturer. Technology manufacturer saw an internal negative trend going on that no one was verbalizing, no one was reporting on. They were able to see that trend, go talk to the team that was showing the negative trend and say, what's going on? How are we failing you? And what they said was, hey, look, we know we want to embody integrity. We know that from leadership down. But separate from that, we've got this pressure to produce something. And it's so much pressure that we're producing something that does not live up to our ethical standards and we think could actually endanger our customers if we're not careful about it. That is a PR nightmare that never became a PR nightmare because they were able to listen to their people in ways they never could before. Go look at the headlines on any given week at the PR crises that so many big companies are going through. If you could listen to your team better and respond before it becomes a crisis, how would that change things for you? And on the customer feedback side, a simple customer feedback form when people visit a tasting room, hey, just rate us 1 to 5 stars, and if you want to tell us how we can do better, let us know. And again, small type, but what you can see happen here is someone could enter some feedback, and that feedback gets posted to an internal, let's just call it a chat room. Every single employee can visit that chat room if they want to. They don't have to. It's not an email inbox where they have to read every single email, but a lot of people go look at it. And sometimes they interact with that chat room. Hey, this customer is a good customer and actually gave us glowing feedback. They love us, but they also said, man, here's something I'd like to have done a little bit better. And someone says, hey, you know what? That's really insightful. Maybe we should do something. I'm hearing about this from more employees or from more customers. Here's an idea we can all embrace to do something with it. And by the way, sometimes the feedback is just so super positive that it's great for people to see that coming in somewhere where it's like, hey, we're making a difference. We're doing a good job. We're helping people live their lives and enjoy things. Simple case study, not too difficult stuff to do. So listening is just the start. You guys probably know who Stephen Covey was. One of the many things Stephen Covey is famous for saying is this: our problem as a society is not that we don't listen. It's that we listen with the intent to respond rather than with the intent to truly understand, right? In today's busy world, we are all experts at looking interested, but not actually being interested, right? You can sit there and thoughtfully be, someone's talking to us, and in the back of our mind, we're thinking, I need you to shut up so I can get my work done, or so I can say what's important for me to say, right? And we can all sense that with each other. We all know what's really going on when that happens. But the idea is we form much better real human connections when we actually understand not just the words, but the context and the body language. We start to know who somebody is, not just what it is that they're saying. And we know how to respond to them on a human level. In the business world, that's called analytics. That's taking all of that information that we've amassed by listening, and it's saying, how can I now make better decisions and have better conversations, either one-on-one or at an aggregate level with that? How important is that? According to this research from IBM, this is the number one differentiator between the best of the best and all of the rest. This is their biannual CEO survey. It's a global CEO survey. They talk to the 1,500 of the fastest growing, largest organizations in the world, and they compare how they're doing. And they take the 20% of that group that's growing faster than anyone else and compare them to everyone else. Now, don't hear that as the 20% that are doing well and 80% that are failing. These are the best companies in the world all around. Now they take the very top end of that and say, what makes the best different from the other 1,200 or so in the survey? And they found three things that stood out. The best are 108% better at accessing data and 108% better at drawing insights out of that data. And then they're 84% better at taking those insights and transforming them into action, right? In other words, the best of the best are good with data. They're good not just at listening and getting that data in, but they're good at analyzing it and drawing insights out. That might sound scary. Oh my gosh, do I need to hire a statistician? Do I need a data scientist in my organization? No. You don't need any of those things necessarily. The big guys might need it. You just need to know how to work with and respond to the data that you've got in your various systems. But here's what's going on with data, and you may know this already. We have more and more and more data available to us, especially as we start to store photos and videos, and just data storage becomes cheaper, and we're storing IoT, Internet of Things data, so maybe we're even monitoring our equipment, maybe we're even monitoring our farms to see what's going on with them. All of that data is coming in. So in 2006, globally, there was 0.16 zettabytes of data. I don't even know how to articulate how much data that is to you other than to say it's a lot. In 2020, that will be 44 zettabytes of data. Your corporate data is growing at about 200% every 2 years. So you will have 2 times more data 2 years from now as you have in your systems today. But what are you actually doing with that data? And more importantly, how good is that data? Because what no one is talking about is this. Between 53 and 80% of all that data you're capturing is RODI. It's redundant, outdated, trivial, inaccurate or incomplete, right? RODI. It's bad data, basically. This is a corporate standard. And in people-centric systems, generally, data is even worse in those systems than other systems. Just think about simple things like, well, I got to go find an old proposal I wrote or a quote that we gave to somebody or something like that. Where do you go? Well, I'm looking inside of Outlook to see if it's maybe still in there, but maybe someone took it and updated it, and I don't know if I've got the right version for it. Oh, I need to find the holiday schedule for this year. Well, where is it? Well, when I did a search, I found the one for 2016. That doesn't help me very much. Go through a week of your life and look at how much junk you filter through to find the information you need to make a decision, and you'll start to appreciate what Harvard Business Review found, and that is that the average worker in today's world spends over 9 hours per week looking for the information they need to get their job done. That's a day a week. That's over 2 months a year your people are spending looking for stuff to get their job done, feeling frustrated and dehumanized because we have not taken the time to keep it clean and neat and easy to access for them. So for some of the organizations, one of the things you need to think about is who is your data steward, right? We have become a culture of data hoarders. Well, it's easier to just kind of throw that file out there over there, and I don't want to delete it because maybe I need it someday. And before you know it, it's 10 years old and it's cluttering up your systems and it's costing you a lot of money to have all of that in there. One way one of our clients put it, this is a law firm, when we talked to them about keeping your data clean, and one of the attorneys there said, I've got an idea. Why don't we have everybody start to keep our physical workspace clean? Like we'll all take turns cleaning the bathrooms and sweeping and mopping the floors, and someone else said, are you kidding? Nobody would work here anymore at the end of a week if we put that policy in place. And they said, that's right. So why is that our policy with data? Why are we taking people who have amazing human potential to contribute to us, and we're putting them into this dehumanizing tactical job that doesn't have a great return on investment, and yet it's really important? Can we not find someone else to steward that who, like the people who clean our offices, like to clean our data for us as well? And they found a new way to make that happen. Now, case study on some of the analytics. Ibercaja is a bank in Spain, and they work with wineries all across the wine regions in Spain, working with them, understanding their data. And what they do is essentially they say they monitor the data. They also monitor soil and equipment on these wineries with Internet of Things reporting. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but IoT is Internet of Things. And that just means things that are connected to the internet that can report information back to us. Your phone is an Internet of Things device. My watch is an Internet of Things device. But there's Internet of Things devices on our equipment now, whether it's farming equipment, whether it's watering equipment, whether it's checking the soil. And there's also the ability to unify that information with incoming information about actual and predicted weather patterns. So they're putting all of that into one place, and Ibercaja's putting that into a data warehouse in their CRM system, and they analyze it using I'll use the term artificial intelligence, which is being misused and overused, and this is probably a misuse of it, but it seems to be a term everyone gets. The real term for it is predictive modeling. They're doing predictive scoring with that data to say, hey, how can we as a bank advise these folks so that they can keep their costs as contained as possible, maximize their crop, maximize their return on investment, and also be environmentally responsible all at the same time. And so Ibercaja, through a partnership with the wineries that they are the bank for, are able to partner with them to bring them technology, to bring them analytics that they wouldn't have on their own, and they're achieving great results by doing that. Now, the third thing that the best connectors in the world do is they actually connect, right? This is where the action is. You've listened and you understand, but now you connect. You guys are in the wine industry, so you can appreciate this. But when we lift our glasses to toast each other, what do is we bring our glasses together. We make a brief moment of eye contact with each person as we clink our glasses together, right? And it's a reminder that when we get together to enjoy a beautiful wine, it's not really as much about the wine as it is about the fact that it's bringing us together with each other. But it reminds me of the fact that that skill, that habit of making eye contact, that's not a secret, and that's not something only a few people can do. Every single person can be a little more people-centric by practicing that habit when they bring their wine glasses together. For some reason, as a culture, as a society, we've decided that, well, there are people with people skills and there are people without people skills. And so we just try to hire people with people skills to do people skill types of jobs. But a lot of studies actually say that people who bring those things together, who may not be the most top-notch with their people skills, but they combine them with good process skills, good task skills, can actually contribute even more. So taking someone who doesn't have people skills and giving them more people skills can make a huge difference. Taking someone who has people skills and coupling them with someone who doesn't, helping them to network, to connect with each other, can actually change the fabric of your organization. What might that look like? Is this all baloney or are there real numbers behind it? Here's a bunch of numbers for you. At the end of this, I have an ebook that I'll actually give you that you can request from me, and I'll send it to you via email with way more of these. My favorite one for this is the second one down. MIT research found if you take people in your organization and you look at the ones that have just an above average number of connections, and there's a lot of science with how they decided what a connection is, but people who have above average number of connections are provably generating more revenue for your business than those who have a below average number of connections. And the cool thing with our digital world now is, for the first time ever, you have tools where you can actually look at this and say, how are people connecting with each other? Who are my best connectors? Who are my worst connectors? How can I bring those together to help bring in new people who might feel like, hey, I'm right on the cusp, and all of a sudden now I've got someone I'm connected with in this organization. I'm a friend with someone here. You know what leads to employee retention? A friend at work. That's one of the biggest things that actually keeps employees coming back again and again, feeling cared for by another human being at work. We can actually scientifically, not force it, but we can create scenarios that give it the ability to happen. We can plant the seeds and give them the opportunity to grow. The way one organization looked at this and approached it incrementally is they did it with what we call Ridealongs. So this is a mid-sized winery, and essentially what they said was, look, we don't want to rush into this. What we want to do is every 1 to 3 months, we're going to have 1 or 2 key people go do ride-alongs with other people inside of our organization. Ride-along comes from the motorcycle industry, and it's literally this idea of, look, instead of talking or surveying or whatever about our customers, let's actually get on motorcycles and let's ride along with them to see what's their experience, what are they missing, what do they love, what do they hate, and how do we change this? Instead of getting into a room and saying, what do you want me to do for you? Where people are kind of like, I don't know, I don't even know how to ask. But when you ride along, suddenly a person who knows what technology can do is working with someone who knows how to do their job very well, and all of a sudden that person says, oh my gosh, I found 5 frustrating things that you don't even know you can ask for help with that I can absolutely do for you that's going to change your job. So over a 3-year journey, this winery's found about 25 different business processes that they've made easier and more efficient and allowed people to now be more like people and less like data entry clerks to get things done more quickly. And I won't read through all of those, but there's a long list of them up there. And they've achieved some pretty amazing results by doing that. Nothing right away. If you'd asked them 3 months in, they'd say maybe there's no ROI at all. It's the net impact of continuing to stay at that over time that's gradually transforming their business. And the fourth thing that the leaders do who succeed more often than those who struggle is that they actually know the results. They continuously improve, right? In the business place, in our workplaces, the way we know the results, it looks like 3 things. It means we have to know the score. We have to share the score. And we have to give everybody a voice in improving the score. None of those things are as easy as they sound like. We actually call this the collaboration principle because really this means changing the way you work together to get your jobs done. And it's not easy. But knowing the score also is hard. When managers get interviewed and asked, how do you quantify how your individuals are contributing to the overall success of the company? The vast majority of them say, I don't know how to measure that. I can measure the big scoreboard. I can measure, what our profit is or, whatever your big metrics are, EBITDA or number of cases sold or whatever it is. I can measure the big score. But when I want to measure what, John or Barbara are doing, I have a really hard time doing that. I intuitively think they're doing a great job, but I don't know how to measure that. There are ways to do that. So the first thing, thinking about the collaboration principle, is this one. If you can actually create a continuous learning culture, a company where people come in and they start to realize we are always learning. The best is yet to come, and I am an active part of making the best come. If you can create that kind of culture, you're going to create a huge difference for your organization over the long term, according to this research from the Deloitte Consulting Company. But creating that is not that easy. Boundary Spanning Leadership is a great book on leadership and collaboration, and one of the top things that leaders in businesses, when interviewed, have said is the most important element they need to have to be successful. 86% say we got to be able to collaborate. We got to be able to work together with each other. We've all got to be in the boat rowing the same direction in the right rhythm to make the most progress over time. And then they ask them, well, how good are you at that? And 7% felt like that they were good at that, right? A whopping 79% gap between one of the most important things we can do together and actually our ability to execute on doing that together. Again, the soft stuff is the hard stuff. How do we align people? How do we create this rhythm where everybody's rowing in the same direction at the same time? So this is actually a negative case study. This comes from one of the top 10 U.S. wine and spirits producers in the world. And this was a CRM. I don't know if you know what CRM is. It means customer relationship management. So it's basically setting up a database to manage relationships they have with lots of different customers. And this comes, I actually share this specific one with you because I think a lot of you might hear some of this and think, wow, he's talking about big company stuff. And I've actually been intentional about sharing some smaller company case studies before now and giving you this big company one to help you understand the big guys struggle as much or more than the little guys with getting this right because they've got way more complexity in human relationships. So these guys tried to set up a CRM solution. They kind of turned it on and waved the checkered flag, got some initial success, but then the way they kind of put it when we talked to them was it fizzled out like a New Year's resolution, right? It's kind of like everyone said, yeah, we got to go to the gym, and then by February 1st, nobody's going to the gym anymore, right? It's like we know we should be doing this thing over here, but for some reason we never got traction with this thing over here. So what happened? What happened to them is common to what happens to many organizations. We call them the deadly sins of the digital workplace. And in their particular case, what happened was they assigned somebody to it that was not going to be with the organization long term. They said the main person doing the lifting and championing this was actually an intern, a bright, sharp intern who did a great job. But when it came time for that intern to go, there was no one there left to champion it. What a lot of other companies do that's a shadow of the same thing is they say, well, this feels like technology, so I'm going to assign it to the IT guy or gal or the IT group or something like this. Are people an IT project? Nothing could be further from the truth, right? IT plays a really important role in this stuff, don't get me wrong, but if IT owns a project that's supposed to drive relationships, that's probably the worst possible group in a company to own that. And really, IT shouldn't own anything. IT should support almost everything these days, but somebody in the business who has a real business goal is who should own it. We see those things happen all the time. And I've put a few of the other typical deadly sins that we see up here. But this is a big company that stepped into making a huge investment in something that had huge potential for them. They made some simple mistakes, and they were in Baltimore, Maryland. Now they're back to ground zero, and maybe starting again, maybe not. I'm not in touch with them anymore at this point. So I like to make things really simple. Listen, understand, connect, and know. If those are the things you do as a human being, you're going to experience deeper, more long-lasting relationships. In fact, Harvard Business School just finished an 80-year study that's kind of unprecedented. They studied human relationships and they said, what leads to happier, longer lives? More than anything else. And the stunning thing they found was our relationship to other people is the number one driver of happiness and longevity. In fact, being in isolation is much worse than chain smoking cigarettes. Other people in our lives is the most important thing. And what I would submit to you is it's no different in business. The more we create better connections between our people, among our people, vertically, horizontally, and with our customers, the more we're going to experience better employee engagement, longer lasting, more beneficial relationships, happier employees who contribute better things to the bottom line. And the way we do that is we create a way for people to better listen to each other, understand, connect, and know. And digital gives us the ability to do that at a broader and deeper level than straight one-on-one human relationships. But it's uncomfortable for a lot of us who have grown up more in-person, one-on-one, pressing the flesh. We now need to learn how do we use digital to make that work even better. But even after having done all this, we found that there were some companies who kind of just seemed to get it. Like we would work with them and it was like all we had to do was kind of show them how this worked, and all of a sudden they were like running down the track and we were trying to keep up with them. And others who we kind of work with and it just seemed mechanical. You know how when you talk to somebody, you can kind of tell like they smile, but their smile doesn't quite reach their eyes, right? Like there's something not real in there about it for them. And we're struggling with like, what is the difference between these? They're all making progress, but some are making it so much faster than others. Until one day we were in a conference room with a leadership team. We took a little break from some brainstorming, and somebody in our group kind of walked up to the wall and was kind of looking at it and said, they've got a really interesting mission statement. So we all kind of gathered around, and it talked about people. It said, we exist to serve our customers to do this, and actually our customers are really not the end user of what we do, so here's how we help serve our end users. And here's how we serve our own supply chain and our employees. Supply chain, who talks about how you treat your supply chain in your mission? But they did. And then it was kind of like, oh, by the way, if we do all these things great, we think we're going to experience financial success with it. And they were successful. And the interesting thing was, this was one of the companies that got it. This was one that was moving forward quickly. And so we started scratching our heads and asking, is this the thing? And how do we define that thing? Because I'm a numbers guy, and I need to kind of see the numbers behind it. So what we called it was this idea: listen, understand, connect, and know. That's luck. That's what you do. Good luck, that is who you are. That's way deeper than just mechanical doing things. That is your purpose. That is your why. Why do you exist? Why do people come in here day after day, every day? And there are some great numbers to back some of this stuff up. I still struggle with this concept. It's something we constantly work on ourselves and with our clients. Here's a great way, a great story that helps me understand a little bit better. I have a good friend, one of the most successful people I know. He basically mostly retired in his 30s to give back. He'd been very financially successful, and he said, I want to give back to society. And he's accomplished some amazing things. But he is one of the coldest cookies I've ever met, a very calculating person. I'm not saying he's a bad person. He's calculating to try to accomplish good things. But it's almost a joke to him and his friends. So some friends would even joke with him, kind of like, hey, we got together. It's like, well, what's your agenda? You're getting together for a beer, but it's kind of like, what's your agenda? I know you don't get together randomly. Nothing is random with you. There's an agenda. And so I'd like to say eventually it hurt his feelings, but he doesn't have any. But he did look at it and kind of say, I need to grow in this area. So he did what he does. He researched it. And he went online and he said, oh, you know what? People with dogs are regarded as being warmer people. So I'm going to go get a dog. And that poor dog was the most neglected animal I've ever met in my entire life, right? His kids fell in love with it, fortunately, so they gave it a very nice life. But the thing with my friend was, he's a good person, don't get me wrong, but he was doing, he wasn't being. That's what he was struggling with. And believe it or not, there are ways to change your culture and use digital as a tool to do it. Now, one thing that Harvard has also found out is this: when it comes to digital, it is not something you do as a leader as a gift to your people, right? Oh, I got this collaboration tool. You kids use it, but I'm not going to. My assistant's going to keep printing my emails and giving them to me, right? I hope none of you are doing that. That was 90s stuff, but maybe. But the reality is, what Harvard has found is actually leaders and managers who actually use digital themselves as a tool to do business better and to do relationships better extract much more value out of it than those many who do not. 81% don't do a good job of this, 19% do. The 19% do achieve better revenue results, but also common to those organizations is they tend to kind of go, it's not just about saying, hey, leader, use that thing, because it's so new. Those leaders go get a digital coach, a personal trainer, right? I'm a guy who needs to go to the gym a little bit more often. I can tell you, when there's a personal trainer that's going to meet me there, I'm actually going to change my behavior a lot more over time than if I got to get out of bed and remember to do it on my own. And they've also articulated a clear vision. What is digital going to do for us? Those are the two things that ultimately result in leaders adopting it and changing the way that they work together. Here's a way one organization did this. How many of you have heard of a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal? Some of you have heard of that? Okay, so the most famous BHAG of all time, to give you an example, is when John F. Kennedy said, we're going to put a person on the moon, bring them back home safely before the end of this decade. And people are like, what? Russia's got people in space. We can't even get someone up there, and we're going to get someone on the moon. Not going to happen. But it did. People rose to the challenge, came together, and it happened. That's the power of a big, hairy, audacious goal. But the reality in today's world is people aren't staying around for as long. Things are merging, companies are merging and changing before you can ever reach your BHAG. And attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. In fact, the human attention span has declined by over 20% in the past 15 years to about 8 seconds. Are you guys still listening to me? Literally, goldfish have a 9-second attention span, and we have an 8-second attention span. So don't worry, you're not going to work for computers in the future. You're going to be working for goldfish. But the reality, we always need stimulus, right? I'm guilty of it too. When we sit in front of TV at night, my wife and I, what do? I've got my phone in front of me. If you bore me for a nanosecond on that show, I'm over here doing something, right? I got to have some kind of constant stimulus to do stuff. BHAGs struggle against that. I'm not saying that they're not in place for them still, but it's not as effective as it used to be. We've created what we call SQAGs, small, quickly attainable goals. Let me give you an example. A BHAG is, Geoff, you need to lose 30 pounds, right? Okay, it's gonna take me a long time. Like I'm gonna forget I ever had that goal before I ever get to it. A SQAG is, Geoff, you need to raise your heart rate for 20, 25 minutes every day. You know what? I have 100% control over that goal. I can decide if I'm gonna make that goal or not. No one else can influence me. I have to reprioritize. I'm gonna have to do something different with my time to make it happen, but I can make that goal happen. And you know what? Whether I make the BHAG or not, the fact that I'm doing the SQAG is still a good influencing behavior on the results that I want in my life. Businesses that are doing this well are doing SQAGs. What one winery did was, based on some ideas in a great book called The Great Game of Business, really good book if you've never read it, they said, you know what, we need to make business more like a game, right? So we want everyone to know the score, and we want to share the score, and we want people to know their own individual scores. We're going to help them decide, what score do you want to focus on? What do you think you can do that can contribute to the overall company? And then, how can we work together to help you do that better? So everyone in the organization had a score that they agreed on measuring. They created peer groups, not top down, not manager, you're not getting your score, but peer groups of people saying we're all trying to improve this score together, and now I'm encouraging you as a peer instead of beating you up as a manager. Even if you're a manager that doesn't beat people up, a manager telling you how can you improve your score, that feels like you're getting beat up, right? Peer-to-peer influence is much more powerful. In fact, Jane McConnell, who has done amazing research on this, says your coworkers in the trenches are way more influential on your overall adoption of digital and ability to make a difference in the workplace than your manager or the executives that you work for. It's your peers. So if you can create a culture where peers are collaborating together to figure out how to do things better together, it absolutely creates results. They put those results out there in a digital format in a way where people could, since they weren't always all centralized together, they could actually talk digitally about how to improve the results, but also how to meeting cadence to support all of this together. And they're experiencing amazing results by getting people now to own this idea that you have the ability to understand what your own metrics are and work together with your peers to influence those. And by the way, the SQAG does not stay the same. Every quarter, every team goes through and reevaluates and says, what's our new SQAG, right? Let me give you the health formula that my wife, who's a much more physically fit person than I am, helped walk me through over many years. Start with, you know what? You need to give up the soda. Okay, I can give up the soda. I was like a 3+ soda guy per day for a while. That was like, I like my caffeine cold. So I gave up the soda. You know what, like let's start raising your heart rate a little bit. Okay, and I can do some light exercises. Hey, I got you this video of these certain training programs are a little more intensive. Let's do some of those together. Okay, you know what, you need to stop drinking beer. And that's when I stopped losing weight. But I did make some progress up until then. So the idea though is incremental changes. You can't have one thing and keep doing it over and over again. You change your behavior, you permanently change it to a new standard, then you add a new one, then you add a new one. And sometimes you come back to ones you already had to say, hey, remember that thing we did 2 years ago where our distributor managers said we're gonna call at least 8 distributors per day to chat with them? Well, we did great, but that was 2 years ago and we've fallen off the wagon. Let's go back and focus on that one again for a little while. Read The Great Game of Business if you want to get deeper into that, but digital can do a lot with that. So if there's one slide that kind of summarizes everything I've been talking about today, it's this. It's this idea of how do we use digital to create longer lasting, more meaningful relationships inside and outside of our organization. Listen, understand, connect, know, good luck. If you're doing those things, you are becoming powered by luck. So yes, you should be reflecting those in your culture with or without digital. I hope all of you are trying to do that. It's always a challenge that keeps us going, right? But digitally gives us amazing new ways to do that better, more effectively, broader and deeper than we were ever able to do that before. Here's the deal. If you're walking down the road and someone says, hey Geoff, how are you doing? Do you do this? 80 beats per minute. I'm doing pretty good, right? We don't live for that. But when people say, how's your business doing? What do we say? Here's what our profitability looks like, right? Here's these other metrics that are good, important metrics. I'm not saying that's not important, but it's a balance. Profit is the pulse, but it's just the pulse. People are the heart. And the cool thing is, we're in the age of people, right? As leaders, we need to embrace it. Whether we embrace it or not, our people are taking us that direction. They require, they demand more than just a job. They want purpose and they want connectedness where they work, and they have options to go find that. So they're influencing us to do that. You guys are in the age where you are building the Chicagos of the future. And in the struggles of trying to recruit good people and losing people you thought were great people and trying to make slow changes over time, pulling your hair out and being in the weeds, you may lose sight of the fact that you are the shoulders that the next generation is going to stand on. You have unprecedented influence to shape the future. Use that influence really, really well. There's some other things I'd love to get in your hands. There's free copies of a book here. They're kind of along that outside edge, and that if you don't have one yet, please feel free to grab one on the way. And if you got a friend who'd like to get one too, and there's some extras left over, please make sure everyone gets one first. Feel free to grab one for other folks. I've also got a couple of ebooks I would love to get you. If you would like a copy, please just take your business card and you can write Win Expo on it, and I'll know what that is. But literally 2 days ago, I was in New York talking to another group. And if I get a business card with nothing written on it, 2 weeks from now, I'll look at it, I'll be like, who is this person? What do I need? So please just write Win Expo on your business card. If you don't have business cards, I've got some up here. You can just write your contact info on those, or you can reach out via Twitter or my email address and connect with me. I think we're pretty close to the end of our time. We've got a minute or so is there a question from the audience, or I can stay up front and just chat one-on-one if you prefer. And do we have someone who's going to make any closing announcements? Okay. Thank you all so much. I hope you really enjoy. Oh, come. Okay.
Thanks. Is this on? Okay. Do you have any information on how much of an initial financial investment these companies are investing in getting these systems up and running and making these changes?
So it is the simple answer to that question is probably it's way too complicated to kind of just give you an answer. But basically, it's proportionately related to how big you are, how many people you're trying to change behavior, how many people you're trying to get things in the hands of. So I know, small companies, between $10,000 and $30,000, and that's like systems and training and all sorts of stuff like that. They're getting up and running. Much larger companies are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars making it happen. So you need to kind of look at yourself along that continuum and kind of decide. But also remember, your investment is, there's an initial investment maybe, and usually your first year is a little more than other years. But if you take the incremental approach seriously, you're really spreading the investment over 3 or 5 years to kind of help slow it down to allow your people to digest it versus spending a lot of money on 1 year and then often failing because people can't adopt that fast. Great question. I wish I had a more succinct answer, but glad to talk to you one-on-one about that if you'd like. Others? Thank you all so much. Enjoy the show. Glad to chat with you up front afterwards.